What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with a special WNBA-focused edition of You Got Boston. And that's the good thing about this podcast name is that it is, this is the podcast mostly focused on the Celtics, but the big news of the week right now, as it relates to Boston basketball is the Connecticut Sun playing their first ever WNBA game at TD Garden in front of a sold-out crowd. So that'll be the focus of this episode. And because I know that most of the people that listen to this show and that are part of my audience are not necessarily super clued in with everything related to the Sun and the WNBA, I'll provide a little bit of some context and some background. So you don't have to be an expert to listen to this episode and get a sense for why I thought, honestly, August 20th is going to go down as a really special day in women's basketball history. And hopefully it's a moment that will have far-reaching implications. So with that, welcome to the show. Thanks again for tuning in. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Noa Dalzell. I cover the Celtics for CLNS Media, and I cover women's basketball for SB Nation. And I've been doing this for about a year, covered the Celtics this whole past season. Honor of a lifetime is the best way to describe covering the road to Banner 18. And I'll also say it's a huge honor to be covering women's basketball right now in this moment when people care. People are starting to tune in and watch, and not just for the basic storylines, but actually to care about the players and their skill levels and, not just one or two players either, but a whole cast of characters. And so I'll just start off by just a little bit of a summary maybe. And so the Connecticut Sun announced about a year ago that they were going to play a professional game of an official WNBA game at TD Garden against the Los Angeles Sparks. And I think the Sparks were chosen just as a Boston-LA rivalry sort of thing. This was before teams' rosters were finalized or draft picks or things like that. So this game was, chosen. It was on the books. It was going to be a big undertaking. For those of you that don't know, Connecticut normally plays at the Mohegan Sun Arena in front of about 6,000 fans. So it's a much smaller arena. They're very passionate fans. They love watching the Sun play. They love the WNBA. They love basketball. But again, it's in a small town in Connecticut called Uncasville. And it's nowhere near the media market that Boston is. And so I live in Boston. I actually live in Cambridge. And most of this past year, I covered the Celtics. And I also went to Sun games whenever I could. But there's no good public transit to take you to Mohegan. It's actually easier to get to Maine. So I was able to get to the Maine Celtics games with more ease than to Mohegan Sun. And so it creates a situation where I don't think a lot of Boston fans are able to go to Mohegan. And also from a media standpoint, there's normally just a handful of reporters that are there. So the Connecticut Sun are actually the team that have the least amount of Instagram followers, the least amount of Twitter followers. And those things don't always indicate the popularity or success of a franchise. And they certainly don't indicate who's good at basketball and who's worth watching, because the Sun are actually the team with the highest win percentage of all time of all WNBA teams. And though they've never won a championship, they're consistently very good. And there's actually a lot of parallels between the Celtics and the Sun. So 2022, the Sun lost in the finals. 2023, the Sun lost in the semifinals, which are effectively the WNBA's version of the conference finals when there's 4 teams left. In 2024, we don't know what's going to happen yet. So maybe they'll have the Celtics luck and win the championship. And I don't think they look, quite like the leading contenders right now, but they're certainly in the mix. So all that's to say is that this is a team that I've been following closely and covering all year. If you want to read any of my coverage on the Sun, you can do so on the Next Hoops, which is where I was writing about women's basketball during the season. And then now it's for SB Nation. So daily coverage. I have a bunch of stories from this week just being around the team at practices, shoot-arounds, and then obviously at the game on Tuesday. So I'm recording this late Tuesday night. This episode will be out on Wednesday. But this Sun team is really unique for a number of reasons. And I asked both DiJonai Carrington, who's one of the stars on the team, and head coach Stephanie White, who's kind of just a women's basketball legend in her own right. I asked them both, what do you want people to know about this team that are tuning in for the first time? And I'm assuming for some of you, maybe you tuned in on NBC Boston and watched this game, and maybe it was your first time watching the Connecticut Sun, or maybe you've been a diehard fan for a long time. But in either case, both of them really stressed to me that their number one priority was ensuring that this team the people understood that this team was defensively focused, and the people understood that this team was like just a hardworking team. Stephanie White actually said, "We're a blue collar organization," and you can kind of get that energy from going to their games. It has this feel of just like grit and grind and just make it happen somehow. And it's not pretty. It's not the prettiest brand of basketball. It's not a bunch of 3-pointers, although they had some tonight, but it consistently is not. It's not really who they are, but they're just defensive minded and they just find a way to win. And I've fallen in love with watching this team, I'll be honest. I'm covering the WNBA at large for SB Nation, so I'm not on the Sun beat anymore. But I will say I've enjoyed covering this team, and being around this team in Boston this week has been really special. The team is really anchored by Alyssa Thomas, she's also known as the Engine. She is the all-time leader in triple doubles in WNBA history, and she's just one of those players that. Kind of like the Sun as a whole, she just finds a way to make it happen. So she's a prolific rebounder. She's a very good passer, and she's so strong. Like, I watched her in the Olympics, and you almost feel bad for the player that she's going up against, because it's not that she intentionally hurts people, but just if she rams into someone, they almost have no chance that they're going to get out of that altercation unscathed, or not altercation, but out of that bump or whatever it was unscathed. The other thing about Alyssa Thomas that you may notice if you watch her play is that she has a very unorthodox shot. It's almost like a push shot. And the reason for that is that she's playing with 2 torn labrums. She plays year round. She plays overseas in the off season. She's never wanted to take 9 months off to, repair those torn labrums. And she probably has other medical reasons why she opted not to. So she's effectively playing without the ability to shoot. And it's an ability that she had earlier in her career when she was in college. So when you watch her play, you might think, this is their best player. Like, she can't shoot. It looks kind of weird. And then you realize how she's literally dominating every aspect of the court, every aspect of the game, getting her teammates involved. She's the emotional leader. And she's also someone who consistently flirts with a triple-double. So on Tuesday night, the Sun beat the Sparks. I probably should have led with that. And Alyssa Thomas had 9 points, 8 assists, and 16 rebounds, and 3 steals. And that's a very classic Alyssa Thomas stat line, where I usually will list that when I write it out, I list the rebounds first, because that's usually the highest. And a lot of times the points are the lowest. And a lot of times she'll just miss out on a triple-double because she had 12 rebounds, 12 assists, and 8 points. Like, that's the category that she oftentimes, lacks in the most. So she's kind of known as the triple-double machine. Then there's DeWanna Bonner, who is her fiance, who's also the 5th all-time leading scorer in WNBA history. So she's a very special player. I think she's somebody that when I think about who has gotten a lot of the media attention for women's basketball and who hasn't, DeWanna Bonner is somebody that I think has a game that would translate so well to marketing basketball. Her moves, she has these pull-up jump shots. She crosses people up. She's 36 years old and she's still in her prime. She was an all-star this year, and she's almost, I've talked to her about this, but it's like she's getting better every year, it feels like. She called herself a late bloomer in a conversation I had with her earlier this season. And a funny, backstory is that DeWanna Bonner and Alyssa Thomas are engaged. So it kind of just makes things interesting when you watch and you realize that probably the two best players in the team also have a very deep emotional relationship off the court as well. And then the rest of the team, I don't want to spend the whole episode just explaining who's on the team, but just because I know there's going to be a lot of listeners who are not as familiar with the roster, I figured maybe this could be helpful. There's DiJonai Carrington. She's right now a candidate for most improved player. She's also a candidate for defensive player of the year, I would say. She's a two-way guard. She is really known for her defense. She consistently guards the opposing team's best player. But in the Suns' win against the Sparks, she was also the offensive plug. She had a team-high 19 points on 8 of 17 shooting. She hit her only 3-point attempt of the night. And she's kind of just a do-it-all type of player. And I think she's somebody that the public has grown to really like and enjoy, and she's become one of the more recognizable names on this roster. And then there's Brianna Jones, a multiple-time All-Star. She's the team center. She had some big hustle plays against the Sparks in this game. And she's also just somebody that just finds a way and a will to get things done. She's strong around the rim. She's a very good defender, previously a second-team All-NBA defender. So she's just another prolific player. Thomas, Jones, and Bonner are kind of known as the big three for the Sun. They also just traded for Marina Mabrey from Chicago Sky. And she's somebody that is not quite a star. Maybe a star would be, putting maybe she is a star. She's maybe a borderline star, I would say. But she's a really good three-point shooter. She's also a winner. She has this kind of gritty, fiery energy that she plays with. And so the Sun traded 2 bench players, Mariah Jefferson and Rachel Banham, and acquired Marina Mabrey during the Olympic break. So it's very unusual to be able to make that kind of trade in the WNBA. There aren't usually these blockbuster midseason trades, but this was one. So that's kind of the core players in the team. There's also Ty Harris. She's the other guard that typically starts. It's Ty Harris and DiJonai Carrington. They're both good defenders. They're both good scorers. I think the thing with Ty Harris is they want her to shoot more. Stephanie White talked about that post game today that they want her to shoot more. She finished with 14 points in this one. So I just kind of wanted to introduce the cast just because I'll be mentioning these players, and maybe for you watched this game, but you didn't really know who was who, so maybe this was helpful. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become a part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit matchup up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit matchup up to $100. PrizePicks, run your game. Really, the story of this game and of this, what we saw today, was that the WNBA has never had a game in Boston before. And obviously the Connecticut Sun are in a smaller town, a town of 20,000 people. So it's nowhere like Boston. And it's been very clear from me talking to the players this week that they want to be in Boston. I don't know that they necessarily want the Sun to relocate, but they want more of these opportunities. They want to be able to play in front of bigger crowds. They want to be able to have like their own practice facility and really good equipment and resources. Like a lot of other WNBA teams have their own facilities. So like the Aces, the Mercury, the Sky just announced they're building one. So other teams are like making sure that they have designated spaces where players can go and shoot, even if it's not during designated practice time. Players can go and shoot at night or on the weekends. During the Olympic break, the Connecticut Sun actually had to go practice in Rhode Island and stay at a hotel. And this is the second best team in the league, right? So they're at a competitive disadvantage because they don't have the same resources that other teams do because they're owned by the Mohegan Sun Tribe. And so it kind of creates this difficult situation where they're limited in what they can do because it's not just one billionaire that owns the team. And there's been some good reporting on this. I know Maggie Vanoni did a good article I just read today where she interviewed some of the tribal leaders that are involved and kind of what some of the obstacles are. So I don't know how feasible, how realistic it is right now that the Sun will move to Boston. But I can say that what this game showed us is that there's a lot of interest and momentum. So the Sun hosted the Sparks, which are tied for the worst team in the league right now, record-wise. The Sparks don't have any huge media names, and neither do the Sun. So this is, there was no Caitlin Clark in this game. There was no Angel Reese in this game. And even so, you saw a huge turnout, 19,000 fans, complete sellout, so much energy. I tweeted this after the game, and everybody's got all mad at me, but I felt like there was as much energy in this game as there was in really any game that I've covered at TD Garden this year. It was up there because I think there was just a lot of genuine excitement and joy and energy around this. It wasn't just about the win. And a lot of times, like in playoff games, you sense that the crowd kind of loses momentum because there's just so much anxiety around, like, are we going to get this done? Am I going to, the $1,000 that I spend, is it going to be for a win or for a loss? And so the crowd kind of ebbs and flows with the success of the team in that game. And it's human nature, I get it, but it creates sometimes an environment where the crowd isn't like amazing the whole time. And I thought the crowd was great throughout this game. It was a lot of families, a lot of young girls. I think a lot of young female basketball players. I know myself as somebody that grew up in Brookline, right outside of Boston, basically in Boston, that I played basketball my whole life, watched basketball my whole life. I would have been thrilled at the opportunity to watch a WNBA game at TD Garden. And so for that reason, I think this was a really special occasion for me on a personal level to be able to be there and to cover this game and to see so much excitement and enthusiasm. And before the game, there was like a block party outside of TD Garden where there was music and signs, and they had a little mini hoop on the hoop bus. And there were Celtics players at the game. Jrue Holiday was sitting courtside with his family. Jayson Tatum was a second half arrival. Anton Watson and Baylor Scheierman, two of the Celtics draft picks this year. They were also sitting courtside. So it was cool that the Celtics were kind of bought into this and that they were a part of this almost, even though obviously the Sun are not officially affiliated. They're NBC Sports Boston's team. And they also are New England's basketball team. And that was kind of the point of this, I think, in a lot of ways, was to give people the chance to recognize that this team is New England's team. And so if you're a Boston sports fan and you want to watch professional sports in July, like, this team is available for you to watch, and they're really good. They're the second best team in the WNBA right now. And they're contending for a championship. And I would say right now the New York Liberty are the favorite, but they're certainly up there. And so this was a really special night. This was one of my favorite nights that I've had at TD Garden this year. The night the Celtics won Banner 18 is going to be number one. I'm not going to deny that, but it was up there because you just felt that you were a part of history, that you felt that the WNBA and this sport and women's sports in general are just growing so tremendously. And this was one of those moments. And there have been a bunch of those moments in recent years. I think the LSU Iowa game, a year ago is still going to be remembered as one of the games that like started this Angel Reese-Caitlin Clark rivalry that brought in so many casual fans to watch this sport because they liked the drama, and the personal stories is what sells, right? And so that's one of those games that's going to go down in history. But there's been a lot of other games that have gone down in history and that I think will continue to be part of this arc of women's basketball being important. And I don't know that there's a better example right now in the WNBA than this game that we saw at TD Garden, because this game showed that it's not just about one player. It's not just about Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or any one big name from the 2024 draft class. And it's about something bigger than that. It's about the fact that there's an appetite and an excitement and a joy for women's basketball. And for that reason, I loved being there. I loved the way the game turned out. I thought that the Sun are the much better team than Los Angeles, but it went down to the wire, and actually the Sun trailed 59-54 with just a few minutes to play. And I was thinking to myself, like, it doesn't really matter who wins this game from a regular standpoint, but I really wanted them to have this moment and to be able to have this win in front of this crowd. And it just wouldn't have been the same if they lost. So I was a little nervous there just for a second that they were going to blow this game that they definitely should have had, but they were missing everything. They were missing layups. They were missing, open jump shots. And I was thinking to myself, like, I really hope that they don't blow this because this crowd is ready to explode right now. And they just want something to cheer for. And they made it happen. The Sun went on a 14-0 run to close the game. And DiJonai Carrington was instrumental. She had 6 points in the last 5 minutes, finished with 19. Brianna Jones had a big and one. Ty Harris had a big and one. Alyssa Thomas. But all of those players were key down the stretch. Ty Harris was diving on the ball. Bree was diving on the ground, grabbing a loose ball. So the crowd loved that. Stephanie White mentioned after the game, like, it's clear that this is a crowd that loves hustle plays. And I was thinking that's the understatement of the century. Obviously, everybody knows that about the Celtics, is that the Boston fan base loves to see people diving on the ground. That's how Marcus Smart became a legend in the city. So it was just awesome to see them, almost blow it. They were trailing by 4 with a few minutes to go and then go out in this massive run, because a 14-0 run to win a game is the perfect recipe to get a crowd excited. And I thought that this crowd was going berserk, and that people, when the game ended, nobody left. Everybody was kind of just standing there. And then DiJonai Carrington addressed the crowd and said, I hope this is not the last time. I hope this is the first of many times. And thank you all for being here, because it's a Tuesday night and I know everybody has places to be in the morning. And that was the general sentiment around this team all week, was that this was hopefully not going to be the last time. And in fact, they didn't say, like, we want to move here. They stopped short of saying that. But that was certainly my impression, was that the players want to be in a major city and they want to play in front of a crowd like that. After the game, in the press conference, DiJonai said, this should be what it's like every single night. It shouldn't just be a special occasion. And so I thought that was, as much as you could insinuate wanting the franchise to be based in Boston. Yesterday at practice, we asked the Dewana Bonner, the team's leading scorer, a veteran in this league, a legend really of the sport, if she thinks that a WNBA team is coming to Boston. And she said it's inevitable. maybe it won't be Connecticut, but it has to happen because this is a city that just loves sports too much. It's a city that loves basketball too much. The culture of the Celtics is so strong, and so you want to see a WNBA team here with the boom of everything that's happening here. And Connecticut's one of just two teams that doesn't have like an NBA team in that city. Seattle's the other, and it's hard because you don't get to ride off of the momentum of the NBA team as well. And I think there's a lot of Celtics fans that would love to watch women's basketball, but they haven't necessarily felt like they should be connected to the Sun. And so in turn, they float around, they watch Caitlin Clark, or they watch the Liberty, or they watch whoever's good. But I think ultimately fandom and being connected to a particular team in a region is what really allows sports to thrive. So I'm super thrilled that this happened. I hope that for Celtics fans, this game was a moment of like, ooh, this team's really good and really fun. And they play again this week, and maybe I'll tune in on NBC Boston and watch, or maybe I'll go to Mohegan Sun for a night and gamble a little and go out to dinner and watch a basketball game.
I love going to watch football games, going to concerts, going to any events in the Boston area, and I use Game Time for all of the ticket purchases that I need. Game Time has a new free feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, to your favorite artists, any event that you want to attend. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So you can search up your favorite artist, your favorite sports team, search it on the Game Time app. You can see there are super deals. There's a lot of cool features on the Game Time app. You can see exactly what the seat view is going to look like. So rather than just picking a random row and loge number, you can actually see exactly what the arena or what the field or what the court is going to be from that perspective. So that's super cool. It's the lowest price guarantee. There's event cancellation protection, job loss protection. So lots of great features for you to use. Game Time Picks really makes it easier to save more money on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is that you want to go to. Game Time is your best bet. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
This felt like a turning point. This felt like a monumental moment. And it was called the historic game a number of times. But it really was. That's why they said it, is because it was a sold out game, 19,000 fans, the third largest crowd this year, and it didn't have any of the biggest names from a media standpoint. And it was the first time ever that in this city, this is the basketball city, there was a WNBA game, and it was at TD Garden. And it was really cool to have the support of Celtics players there. I don't even want to say support because it's not support. They're watching a basketball game. Like they don't need to be supported. Like that's not the right language to use. But the fact that they were able to go and to watch and to be there and to kind of signal the fact that like they wanted to be there, right? It was Tuesday night and they wanted to be there, and Jrue Holiday bringing his whole family and everything. It was really awesome. So this will go down for me as a personal favorite as far as my first year of covering basketball. For those of you that didn't watch the game, and maybe you probably didn't get to this far in this episode, I think you should definitely watch that game, honestly. Like, go back and rewatch it because you get to see TD Garden. If you're just a Celtics fan and a TD Garden enthusiast, you just get to see basketball at TD Garden at the highest level and at kind of the highest level of emotion too. And if not, if you don't want to go back and rewatch games, I tend to struggle with going back to watch games that have already happened. I like not knowing what's going to happen. The Sun play the Liberty on Saturday in New York, and I'm going to be there at Barclays Center covering that game too. So this is all, I think, just a really exciting moment for basketball. It's an honor for me as someone who grew up playing basketball and now covers the sport for a living to be able to be a part of this and to be able to watch these games and talk to these players. And just honestly, the press access for the WNBA is a lot easier. So, I go to shoot around, I can request to talk to any player. I go to practice, I can talk to any player, so it's just easier to be able to get an impression of how people are feeling, how things are doing. Whereas on the NBA side, like normally they'll give us one or two players to talk to and you have a huge media scrum around them. So it fosters this like unnatural conversation, unnatural environment. So on a personal level, from a coverage standpoint, the WNBA has been awesome too, because, you can just grab anybody and talk to them. And yesterday I was going around asking all the players, like, are you Celtics fans? And they are for the most part. And Marina Mabry said, she's a huge Jayson Tatum fan. So must have been cool for her to see him there courtside, cheering them on. DeWanna Bonner said, since she's been a part of this franchise, like she's really taken a liking to this team. Veronica Burton, who's someone I actually played against. She grew up in Newton and I grew up in Brookline, Townover. I remember her. She definitely does not remember me. There was not as much to remember from a basketball standpoint, but she said she's a massive Celtics fan and she grew up a huge Rondo fan. And so for her, this was a really awesome opportunity. And I know her sister works for NBC Boston. Her dad is a Boston media legend as well. So that was cool to see all the ties there. For somebody that's so local to be able to play her first ever game at TD Garden. I was surprised to learn that. I assumed she had probably played a big game there at some point, but it never happened. So yeah, just I guess just to wrap it up, I guess to say this was a really special moment. And I do encourage people who are not WNBA enthusiasts to give it a shot. And maybe it's not for you, but I think that the general rule of thumb that I've heard people say, that the Sparks head coach Kirk Miller said, that Stephanie White said a bunch of times, is that if you watch, if you play it, they'll watch, and if they watch, they'll get hooked. Like, that's the general understanding of the WNBA. And I can say I did not grow up watching the WNBA. I grew up watching the NBA only, and so I just started watching it in recent years, and I was like, where was this has been my whole life? Like, why didn't I watch all the great legends like when I was in high school, when I was growing up? And I wish that I had. And I think there was a lack of like societal understanding and awareness about this league. And the league has improved certainly too, but a lot of it comes from like, what are we talking about? And so one of the things that I find frustrating sometimes is that like people say, the women's basketball, the only player that really matters is Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And I will say, like, I write articles and I see SEO. When I have Caitlin Clark in the headline, the article does a lot better. Like, I'm not going to deny that. It does a lot better. And so, like, I have an incentive to include her name in the headline and to write about her because that's my job. I need to write articles that people read. And when you write about other players that are like legends in their own right, that just don't have that mainstream, familiarity with their name, like, people don't click on those articles. And so your takeaway might be like, okay, I just won't cover those players anymore because nobody cares. But I don't think it's that nobody cares. I think it's that nobody knows. And so I think that what's happening right now in the WNBA with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and these other young stars, and those two are really like defining this whole era of basketball, is that, like, come for Caitlin Clark and stay for Jackie Young, stay for DiJonai Carrington, stay for DeWanna Bonner. I think Caitlin Clark's an incredible player. I love watching her play. I'm a three-point shooter, and I find three-point shooting to be the most exciting part of basketball, and her passing. Everything about her game is fun to watch. But I think there's a lot of other really good players that are fun to watch too, and they're as fun to watch, but nobody knows their story, and it's not fun to watch a bunch of players you've never heard of. And it's not fun to read an article about a player you've never heard of. And so there's just a learning curve that needs to happen. And I think that there are certain players, not every player is going to capture the national attention of the world, and not every player is going to become a fan favorite and a mainstream name, but there's a lot of players that I do think are going to. And I think like DiJonai Carrington's one of them because she's outspoken, she's fiery, she's a great defender, she's a slasher, she does a lot of different things that I think just are marketable and translate well. And so she's somebody that, like, maybe you didn't know of her 2 years ago, but I guarantee you in 2 years when I have her name in a headline, that article is going to do really well. So my point being is that I think people are talking about the Caitlin Clark stuff like black and white, like, she's the only player people care about, or like, no, she's getting sold by the media and nobody actually should be watching her. And like, the reality is that she's a very good player. She's one of the better players in this league. She's one of the best guards in this league already, I think. But she's also getting a completely disproportionate amount of media coverage. And the reason for that is because we're incentivized to cover her right now because that's what people are clicking on. And then it creates the self-fulfilling prophecy where people are clicking on her name because they recognize it and they know her and they care about her storyline. And then more people click, so more people write, more people click, more people write. And the names that people aren't clicking on are not getting written about anymore because there's no proof that people want to read about those players. And so it's in our hands, in media's hands, to tell the stories of the players that you all don't know, and to be able to sell other teams, not just the Fever, and not just the young stars, but also the older stars that have been doing it for a long time. I think DeWanna Bonner is somebody that should be a household name. I think everybody that watches DeWanna Bonner highlights will be like, "Oh, she's really fun to watch." And so she's somebody that, like, I'm going to keep writing about, and maybe less people will click, but eventually I think people will because they'll recognize just how fun and incredible she is to watch. So the big headline, one of the big headlines from tonight, is that this game wasn't on national television. It was streamed on the local broadcast on NBC Boston, on the local LA broadcast. It was streamed on X by the WNBA, and it was streamed on NBC Sports Boston and on League Pass. But it wasn't on national TV. Meanwhile, most of the Indiana Fever games are on national TV. So I think there was a sense of frustration from Sun players that there was this historic moment that was happening, and that even though there was like history being made, it wasn't it wasn't accessible for everybody in the country to watch. And DiJonai Carrington said after the game, like, this game should have been accessible for everybody. This was a historic moment, and you shouldn't have had to pay for a special subscription to be able to access it. And I think she's absolutely right, because I think this is the kind of game that if it was made easy and if you could just flip through your channel and see it, you'd watch and you would fall in love with some of these players. And then next time I go write an article about DiJonai Carrington, that's the girl from the national TV game that they watched. So even if you were a casual fan and you didn't know her, you maybe fell in love with her in this game. And so it was a missed opportunity. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that a lot of people are still aware that this game happened, and a lot of people, especially in the big media markets of Boston and LA, they're not small markets, really enjoyed this game. And so I'm not going to cover the WNBA a ton on this show. Most of my coverage right now is in written form on sbnation.com/WNBA. Every morning after games, I rank the best performances of the day. I write about the big stories. I'm going to be on the ground covering the playoffs. So do follow along, read those articles. You can subscribe to my newsletter. You can follow me on Twitter. I post most of my articles there, or you can just check up on the URL when you want to read more women's basketball coverage. But once in a while, I will do an episode on this podcast, because at the end of the day, this podcast is called You Got Boston. So technically, I'm allowed to talk about other Boston things. And full disclaimer, I don't follow football, Red Sox, any of that stuff. So I won't ever do shows on those things. You can find great CLNS coverage on NFL, and sure, you can find baseball coverage elsewhere. I don't even know where you'd find it, but I'm sure there's a ton. But the WNBA will do here and there some episodes. So feel free to follow along, tune in. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about the Connecticut Sun and the WNBA or not. Let me know if this episode was too much of an explainer. Like, maybe I didn't need to explain any of the players and I could have just started breaking down what happened in this game. The next time I will. Or if you didn't know much about the team and this was helpful, let me know. So really appreciate it. Again, feel free to subscribe, rate. You can give me 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, like, comment on YouTube. The show is You Got Boston. Noa Dalzell with CLNS Media, and I thoroughly appreciate your time and for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoyed this moment in women's basketball history.